talk for maybe 35 minutes. Yeah, that sounds good. 35 minutes.
All right, sounds good.
Okay, so Mr. Alex von Goldstein. Um, okay, okay. I usually start off by talking about asking somebody about their childhood. So, what was your childhood like?
I grew up in New Jersey. I definitely had interesting adventures on the playground, and it's interesting to look back on your life because you a lot of times think that like supernatural events occurred, like you saw your future or parallel versions of existence. I mean, I could remember seeing Che Guevara, and it was like a kind of like apparition of him. And then later on, just through like reading and investigation, I find out that Chesed and Guevara are two pillars in Sephiroth, which is an important part of Jewish Kabbalah. So Chesed Guevara is actually kind of like the mythical Jewish concept. So the idea that Che Guevara is perhaps even like a Jewish god. I mean, he's not the only person I remember seeing. I remember seeing Babe Ruth. I saw Napoleon. I saw Alexander the Great. I mean, these were the weird events that were kind of like beyond even dreaming. They were like bizarre, kind of like breaks in reality. Because I think when you're a kid, a lot of people don't really even like to admit this kind of stuff because it freaks them out. But I think when you're a kid, your brain, if you even wanted to make it all science based, it just has a lot more dimethyltryptamine going, and it's really easy to see the universe as this really insanely luminiferous multiverse that has all these endless parts that just kind of go in and out of each other. So, like, the idea that the future is the past is, and it's all like an eternal now that the human mind catches up to understanding, and you figure out how to live in the eternal now. Like, these are all these lessons that I just kind of feel like I was always taught by the world around me. I think like I should always run into like hippie people and stuff like that who would talk to me about Advaita Vedanta or Jesus Christ. You know, a lot of people, right? I mean, like they would try to convert me to Christianity or even right wing politics. So I mean, like, and then later on, I was more punk. I was more into the Ramones and the Clash and Nirvana,
Oh yeah, yeah.
and I was against the Iraq War. So I was another Star Wars fan who played soccer, and I liked Hoop There It Is, but I wasn't. I guess I was always sort of political. Like I was a fan of a more kind of out there candidates like Ross Perot or Ralph Nader. I can remember voting for Ralph Nader in the 2000 election at school when we got to in class we got to just vote for the president. I mean, it was like a fake like kid vote, but the year 2000 I voted for Ralph Nader, and I really didn't want George Bush to win back then. I was pretty liberal, and 9/11 was a big deal. I just read Thomas Pynchon's book Bleeding Edge, and I read about a month or two ago. That takes place during 9/11, and how kind of haunting 9/11 was.
Oh
Especially,
yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. Like, I don't know if you've ever seen like that. I'm trying to think. It was like a YouTube compilation video showing all the commercials and TV channels on YouTube. Before 9/11 happened.
Right. I mean, you used to see in films like Armageddon or Godzilla or Independence Day, they would always blow up New York. So I would always have this premonition when I was a kid that something could have happened. Hold on a second. Sorry, just have to do my James Bond stuff while I'm doing the show. But yeah, I would always have these kind of premonitions that New York was going to blow up. I mean, or like it was in the film Deep Impact, these waves crash into the Twin Towers. And I just remember Deep Impact, or there was another one, The Day After Tomorrow. That was later. I mean, that was actually after 9/11. Sorry, the Deep Impact Independence Day, and Armageddon. Those movies were like an insane part of like the horror subconscious that was like being projected at people, especially concerning the weirdness of Y2K and Nostradamus. So when I was a kid, the other kids would always kind of like fib about these like weekly world news kind of events that were supposed to happen, like Osama bin Laden was going to make toxic rain happen. Like there had been an airborne toxic event caused by bin Laden in America. Uh, that like you'd always hear these things, like people were going to be sent to FEMA camps. So when the Iraq War happened, that was also like a fever ground for uh, paranoia that we would even be drafted. Um, but as when you get older, be in a way being right wing makes sense though. I mean, I can understand why countries go to war, but I'm not someone who's pro war though. I mean, I know people who are in the military. You have to honor your friends, but at the same time, like the military itself and just the action of war that human beings are in, kind of hope that human beings can actually evolve out of war. That's uh, that's something that I think I always had a kind of belief in, that humans were gonna get to a higher level of consciousness and maybe use the seeds that could come from a kind of like mergence with AI that's happening. And it's kind of like that thesis that like your life and like growing up and having friends, like hanging out and playing video games, it's kind of like prep for AI taking over. Because it's almost like what the next step of like, you know, um, adolescence is when everybody's like smoking pot and taking mushrooms. There's the aspect of mushrooms that comes from CIA Project Stargate, and how mushrooms are part. Gordon Wasson was a huge part of popularizing mushrooms. He's part of the CIA, and what MK Ultra is, how MK Ultra is downloaded in mushrooms, how people who make TV shows take mushrooms. So there's like this mushrooms control grid. One second. Hey, which house you going to?
18.
18?
Number 5.
Okay, 18 to 5. All right, 1 second. You can go. The gate's open.
For me?
Yep. 1 second. Yeah. Just had to do some work there. Yeah. Just shuffling the whole thing together. But yeah, I mean, I had a good childhood. I had like cool friends. I had dogs. I have a sister. I did the typical thing where I was a fan of like cartoons like South Park. I watched The Daily Show and Colbert Report. But it wasn't until I was older,
Oh, did you ever watch Adult Swim?
experiences with music and music culture that I kind of felt like I formed into myself.
Did you ever watch Adult Swim? I don't know. I'm not sure how old you are or what year you were born, but
I was born in 1989.
oh, so when Adult Swim came out, you were like 12.
I think so. I mean, I remember home movies being on.
Oh yeah, Mission Hill. I love Mission Hill.
Yeah, I mean, they even had the band Silkworm uh, be part of the soundtrack. Um, on that show. So there's I mean I'm saying before like I had very transcendental experiences with music, but even music and like the I'm not saying I think the punk culture kind of erupted in a natural way, like hardcore music. But if you look at the CIA documents and you kind of peruse what people like Eric Davis write about concerning like Huxleyism or Philip K. Dick and like their kind of like hyper reality. It's just sort of like how they're also involved in government projects to be these kind of official people. You can just see like how the legal reality of America at a certain level is about creating some kind of like substrata, like hallucinogenic fugue state that people sort of respond to. That's like the thing from taking mushrooms that's at the bottom of cinema and music like Neil Young or even the Grateful Dead. So it's like the Grateful Dead and like jam culture, as awesome and fun as it is, it's almost like I live my life like going through this like fun tube of like all these like games and shows, and then like I get out of it and like it's all this like to this revelation that like somebody like Jay Dyer would talk about, like this revelation that it's all like a CIA program that's even from the devil because it's just not.
Yeah, it sounds like I don't know if you ever read Grant Morrison.
I mean, I know the Invisibles. He's a kind
Yeah.
of Gnostic.
Oh yeah, I love the Invisibles.
I mean, I'm a fan of Alan Moore and Frank Miller. At least from when I was in high school, I was certainly a fan of the Sin City comics and Alan Moore's Watchmen.
Oh yeah, I love
I mean, I
Watchmen.
think the Sin City comics for a lot of people are kind of they think they're just too pulpy, but they're just incredibly well drawn. And how the subject matter could be like a Jim Thompson or Charles Willeford novel. Or I mean, in a more kind of eruptive, surrealistic, like Kafka-esque way, even there's a kind of like insanely hyper surreal element to Sin City and over the top like nature of the characters. I was like just so into the Sin City comics when I was about like 15 years old. Um, the mood of the comics was definitely it was they were just at a level of intensity that was even kind of like scary. I mean, I was also into David Lynch's movies. I was a big fan of Blue Velvet, and I even really liked his version of Dune because I'm a big fan of the Frank Herbert novel Dune. And I think David Lynch's film Dune does really hold up despite the fact it's kind of campy. I mean, I've always been a really big cinephile, despite the fact that movies also they're not really part of Christian election. So I sort
Yeah,
of
who my favorite.
but
Oh,
I do think there's an element of watching films that is a thing called transcendental. And Paul Schrader, he claims to be a Calvinist, and he wrote a book called Transcendental Style in Cinema. So the idea that there's somehow a transcendental style in cinema that actually could perhaps be God in film, that Bresson or Tarkovsky, that they are actually truly transcendental filmmakers, or perhaps even Werner Herzog, that he's the or Bellatar.
Yeah,
Uh,
I wonder if Harmony Korine and Gaspar Noé would fit into being transcendental.
well, I think they are influenced by the transcendental style, but they might be a kind of like movement called post verita, where they're able to take the aspect of, you could think, Von Trier or Godard, especially weirder Godard like King Lear or
Jodorowsky.
Jodorowsky is an interesting filmmaker, but Jean-Luc Godard's stranger films like Hail Mary or King Lear, I think they were an influence on Harmony Korine and Gaspar Noé to kind of push the envelope with the feelings from movies and how you could really break that thing called cinema verite that's maybe in the Bresson film like The Double Probably, 1977, and especially how Bresson always uses non-cinematic actors in his films. So it's like there's Bresson and Verita, but then there's the Godard of the 80s. And the Godard of the 80s, I think, makes a kind of statement that really kind of breaks the boundaries of what a film, like what his film King Lear does, but even including Woody Allen, Norman Allen, the work he does, and himself. He's really able to throw uh, the celebrity that you see in other films, like Norman Mailer acted in his own movie Maidstone. When Norman Mailer shows up in King Lear, it doesn't feel like he's the dude from Maidstone at all. Like Joe Luc Godard is able to really mess with temporality and the element of montage to make a movie that really seems like it comes from, in a way, out of time, and in other ways has a kind of pretentiousness to it that overstates the elements of art about it. You actually have to be affected by it simply as an art film. And I think that Goodbye to Language from 2014, speaking of Godard, Goodbye Language from 2014 and then the Image Book from 2018, that those are really powerful final statements and could be his best films, just simply put from how they really mess with the genre. And like, if you just think about the evolution that they are from Alphaville and Breathless, it's like those are two great films in and of themselves, but they actually are the thing that's parodied or deconstructed or turned absolutely into a different state by the Image Book, that in a way is kind of like a eulogy for cinema. And then Godard passes away in 2022, and then there's a film called Phony Wars that's actually able to get a hold of, and it's what he was trying to put together as his last film, and the footage from it. I really hope that somehow this production when he works with is able to just show us more footage from the film because it really is.
You're talking about cinema. A couple of days ago, I was watching the Eddie Murphy movie Boomerang, which, if you ask me, is an underrated romantic comedy film. You know,
What about
you have
Bowfinger?
crap. I don't remember Bowfinger. What was Bowfinger about?
It's him and Steve Martin. Just Bowfinger and Boomerang kind of seem like similar movies. Like, I mean, Hollywood seems like it's this thing that kind of repeats itself. Like the same movies come out. And then there was this Mandela Effect episode about this movie called Shazam.
Yeah, but it was really Kazam, which is the
Right, with
actual name of the
Shaquille
movie.
O'Neal, but then everybody thinks it's a movie with Sinbad.
Yeah, it's
What,
crazy how memory works. Like I've once read somewhere that memory is never 100% correct, that there's always some sort of distortion.
it seems like there's collective distortions that occur, like the Shazam event with Sinbad. it seems like a lot of people have gone through that, and that's also like I'm saying where you have these experiences of apparitions that the experience of like Nickelodeon, like just being such a big deal, like a really pervasive thing in life, like Are You Afraid of the Dark? I mean, did you watch shows like that?
Are You Afraid of the Dark was a little bit before my time,
Okay,
but I did watch Goosebumps and I did watch Animorphs and Keenan and Kale, Cal. No, that was Cartoon Network. Keenan and Kale, Cat Dog, Ren and Stimpy, Rocco's Modern Life, Cousin Skeeter, Invader Zim.
I remember Cousin Skeeter well. I never
Yeah.
really was a fan of Invader Zim, but it kind of um, matches a kind of hauntology that I practice in a way that has to do with like just retro internet stuff, like Newgrounds.com, and Invader Zim kind of seems like it's like Newgrounds because there was that game Alien Hominid. I don't know if you ever had the chance to play it.
Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about.
It got updated for like real gaming systems at a point. But it
Yeah,
was initially a Newgrounds.com game.
yeah. I remember playing that game. You know what
Well,
sucks is that
Alien Hominid. It was kind of like Invader Zim. It had its own kind of like really over the top cartoon design, and then like the game I think was even
yeah.
cel
You know,
shaded.
I miss the early internet. The early internet was like a wild west. You know, you could get like copyrighted movies and porn and uh you know there was like computer games. It seems like the internet is getting lamer now. Like they got all these restrictions. They want you to show your ID to watch porn, and it's like I'm a grown man. Like why do I have to do that? And then they also, CartoonNetwork.com doesn't exist anymore. I remember playing like games on the website when I was a little kid.
I mean, I guess at the same time, what ends up happening is when everybody gets on the message board and starts talking about who they are, what their politics are, they'll kind of feign that they're right wing, so then just enact stuff that's going to be more conservative, or they, in their heart, are guided by the Lord to just do stuff like make quote unquote porn be harder to get to from how. Sorry, they just want to make it be harder to get to from how it's kind of like, well, it can cause, I guess, kind of disruptive behavior and addiction. But I mean, I don't know. At the same time, I've heard people argue that it's important for people to have access to pornography. So it seems like it's an open debate. I guess being forced to show ID. I mean, I, it's. I guess it's at a certain point. I understand why it's the case, but it's just because I just think that as the technology expands, like you're saying, it was a Wild West before. I mean, there's like on YouTube, if you want to watch an Andrei Tarkovsky movie, you can find Stalker or The Sacrifice immediately. Like, there's full Jean-Luc Godard movies, there's full Ingmar Bergman movies. You can actually listen to, like, I think, like, most music's available on YouTube. If you want to listen to every Led Zeppelin album or every Pink Floyd album or every Genesis album, you can just do that immediately. So, like, you can actually kind of give yourself the, like, school of rock and avant-garde art house cinema pretty quickly. And, like, it's, it might not be the most righteous and holy of um, behavior to just sit around and watch movies all day, but there is something about Tarkovsky and Bresson, Robert Bresson films like The Lancelot of the Lake and The Devil Probably, and for Tarkovsky, The Sacrifice and Stalker, that have a really interesting transcendental spiritual aspect to them that could be a kind of latent Christian aspect because you can feel the influence of the Holy Spirit in some of the shots. You can sense the Christianity of Bresson um, or Tarkovsky's even struggle with. with God, that's how the films are. That thing called transcendental. I mean, when in the sacrifice, it's the end of the movie, so it's a bit of a spoiler. When early Kalon burns the house down, it almost seems like it's you know a kind of like sign of the end of a certain kind of cinema to say that the end of Tarkovsky is like the end of Bresson and Bergman or even Kurosawa. That they had left their best work behind them, and that film was this thing that existed from the 50s. Or it starts with Breathless and Hiroshima Mon Amour, and it ends in the 80s with like Kajimusha or Ran and The Sacrifice. And it's like the art house experience of film because everything else, like Monty Hellman and Sam Peckinpah, and even Peter Bogdanovich, it's all kind of like um, grindhouse to a degree, or like exploitation cinema. That's like just stuff that's going to be on TV. So everybody ends up really appraising how great like all film is, but it really is that line from Godard to Bergman to Antonioni to Tarkovsky that maybe doesn't even go in that order, or it doesn't go in that order at all. It's like goes, you can see that reality in different ways. Um, what the French New Wave and left bank filmmakers were doing, what people like Agnes Varda did in film, or people in um, Germany, like Werner Herzog and Wim Wenders in the 70s at least. I mean, I am a fan of even Wings of Desire, 1987. That's a really that I think is a kind of beautiful and transcendental film that has to do with angelology and has a really interesting performance by Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds at the end of the movie. So it's really cool to see Nick Cave at the end of Wings of Desire. But even that film was actually remade as City of Angels with Nicolas Cage, and City of Angels is nothing like the Vin Vendors film Wings of Desire that even has Peter Falk play an angel alongside Bruno Ganz, who we all know as Hitler from the Downfall memes. But his like their Peter Falk and Bruno Ganz's interplay as two angels that interact with the human realm. It really is an interesting film and a deeply moving film to think about the status someone has in the state of the thing God, because it's sort of like this line in life is this thing where people transition from humans to angels. So you just have to sort of follow your relationship with God and Christ, and that's this thing that like if you apply that to movies, they're way cooler. That you have to sort of challenge the film, have God be there with you. Really throw God at movies, and if you throw God at movies, uh, like I can't stop watching One Battle After Another with Leonardo DiCaprio. I think that film has a lot of really transcendental aspects to it, and it's
Oh yeah, that I heard that movie's good. What movie? I'm trying to see. I Love Boosters. They say that's good.
well, One Battle After Another has really interesting subversive political context to it, and it's interesting to see like Leonardo DiCaprio play this like crazy far left militant who's helping illegal immigrants out in California, and the intensity of the right wingers that are trying to basically just like take him out. It's an interesting microcosm for the political climate of the last 10 years, where you just seen a radical left wing develop, a radical right wing develop, and people basically choose sides against each other. And I think it's really smart to just take that radical centrist perspective and try to see beyond all the binaries in the political realm. In one battle after another, it does do that to a degree, but Sean Penn's character, he is kind of a really strange right wing villain who has his own kind of fatal flaws that are related to sexuality about him. So it's the kind of like intensity of that movie where the political world is thrown into violence very quickly. That's how you can kind of it's. I mean, it's you can see Paul Thomas Anderson forces you to be confronted with the reality of illegal immigrants and or people that are actually even migrants and what their existence actually is. And I mean, another deep film about migrants is Gregory Nava's El Norte. And El Norte, really, I saw it in high school. My teacher showed it to me. Showed it to the class actually. The ending is really disturbing, where the main character's father's head severed and hangs from the tree, and then he loses the American dream and is forced to become a laborer who would like work for nothing. And it's how El Norte, in a way, it's sort of like updated through one battle after another. Where you can see the reality of people who have to deal with immigration control, of course, from the other side. So it's like there's a lot of people who are really right wing who just kind of hate immigrants. But one thing is, if you see a film like El Norte or even One Battle After Another, you can actually understand the struggle of people that are in what you can call press groups. You can actually see it more up close and personal, and it's made to be more like just straight up emotional. And then you can kind of lose some of, I guess you can lose some of the hate when you see those films. It might feel better to get over some bad emotions. And that's kind of like what the purpose I think of film is in a lot of ways, like Agnes Varda's film Vagabond, or even a film like The Enigma of Caspar Hauser, like by Werner Herzog, where it basically shown side of life that's people that actually live in abjection. And I think everyone experiences some degree of abjection, but it's the intensity of abjection. I guess in film, the example that would be the most extreme would be Mike Leigh's Naked, but that's this thing that like Nietzsche maybe valorized to a degree. That's a transvaluation of morality. That's like the idea that somebody needs to be the one and not the many and be broken from the herd. Um, and that this is the experience that many people are forced to be in by life. Watching films can actually help you get to that thing. That's not the many, that's a herd. But if it's a herd, it's the herd of sheep that are being flocked by Christ. So it's like I went to go see Oasis in concert. They're a really mainstream rock band. But being able to sing along to Don't Look Back in Anger and even Wonderwall at like a stadium in America, it's like a bunch of people that want to be in that, saved from probably the Church of England to a degree.
Yeah. Well, we're coming to the end. Like, is there any projects you want to promote, or is there anything you're doing?
Well, I mean, I like to work on existential mathematics and to try to think in ways like how I can posit the existence of impossible numbers. And that's like just to make life be better in a lot of ways because there's this thing called eternity. And as a Christian, I want to be able to inherit eternity with God. So it's that project of like what my life is and then what my life is through Christ's divinity. And I think that being open about Christianity and living through Christ and with Christ is a crucial part of life. And if the eternity of God and how we as humans, like Ecclesiastes 3:11 says, He has put eternity in our hearts. but no one can fathom what God has done from beginning to end. So, because God and God's actions are actually unfathomable, and we can't actually understand God, it's understanding the irrational aspect of not being able to understand that is this really, uh, in a way, beautiful experience of Christ and Christianity. If you can actually understand the full save of God, that He doesn't let bad things happen, you can actually live through His plan and understand how things are actually part of His plan. So the idea that um, mathematical tessellations, mathematical tessellations and tilings, and different kinds of fractalizations that are representations of things like Julia sets and Mandelbrot's work could actually work out to the realization of what Christ's living existence is this awesome way of seeing and being in downtown real time. And when you apply music to it, it's even cooler and just like this way to just view life in a deeper way. So I guess the weirdest thing ever what I work on in my life is just my experience with God and
Yeah.
knowing God in a really weird, deep mathematical way. It's like a positive version of the movie Pi.
All right. Well, it was nice talking to you.
All right, dude, it was awesome talking to you.
All right. Thank you.
All right, we'll talk soon. Bye bye.
Okay.